It's a ridiculous day in the world of Magic the Gathering. Wizards of the Coast has just admitted that they made a big mistake with the Murders at Karlov Manor set. So we're starting off 2024 in style with more problems. And on top of that, we have to talk about the staggering collapse of Magic the Gathering Online.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The magic historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, my friends. I hope the day finds you well because we have gathered for another ridiculous installment of Mega Magic News Special Bad Times Edition. So, Wizards of the Coast can't help themselves. They always have to have something going wrong, right? And I mean, this kind of dovetails with what's going on in the current time frame with Wizards of the Coast letting a bunch of people go, but I'm sure that won't exacerbate the problem. But let's start with the actual problem itself. So, Wizards put out, I wouldn't exactly call it a cryptic message, but normally when something like this happens, we get more information. So, they just put out an article that's basically a sentence, and it says an earlier version of the showcase artwork for Fanatical Strength in Murders of Karlov Manor inadvertently made it to press. This is being corrected digitally for Arena and anything else, including future printings. But it means for Murders at Karlov Manor, they've used an earlier piece of artwork. Now, we've seen this before. I believe it was Alana Danner, right? Specifically. But when that happened, they came out and said, okay, so we've actually kind of spoken to the artist and we're going to get them copies of the card that they can give out. There was a little bit of a hubbub at first that led to this, but ultimately, at least when they made the announcement, we got to see the artwork, so we knew what was going on. They went, here's the unfinished artwork, here's the finished artwork, here's how it's supposed to look. But instead, we just get this weird little, hey, we screwed up the card, and it makes you wonder why. Now, obviously, we won't know 100% until we see this printing because they're not showing it to us. But this is specifically on a story spotlight card, okay? So this is supposed to showcase a moment in the story where Callan and Kea are under attack and the super detective Proft, who we haven't met yet, right? We haven't met that guy in the story. There's only one installment of the story out so far. I've actually put it out over on my Magic Lore channel. So check out Fantasy Geographic if you want to know the underlying story for this set. But the card is supposed to be flavor text talking about Kay and Kellen being attacked, and this is leading to some sort of conclusion. But the artwork, who knows what it actually depicts? Now, the fact that they didn't show it at all leads me to believe that there's probably some bigger difference between them. My best guess off the top of my head is that perhaps Kellen actually isn't there in the set. Like originally when they designed this Markov stuff, they had no plans to include Kellen. Because if you look at Kellen, yeah, when we had the Wilds of Eldraine story, right, that clearly was built around Kellen. But from that point onwards, he really did feel shoved in, and it may turn out that they completely reworked the initial story for Kellen. But we saw him, oh look, here he is in this story, just running from some goblins randomly, running up to Amalia going, hi, we're buddies now, and I guess I'm under your care. And then all of a sudden he's just, well, now he's on Markov, and he's part of an investigation team, and he has been for a while, and he's going around telling people he's been an investigator like his whole life. It's this very bizarre, they're just stapling Kellen into everything, and I think it's supposed to culminate with him meeting his dad in Thunder Junction, and like the evil, here comes Oko in a cowboy hat, I love you, Papa. Like Kellen is so shoved in. That's what it feels like. So this says to me, Yo, probably the artwork they're not showing us. You're literally going to have a card talking about Kellen, and you're going to be like, who is this character they have on the card? Or just some other planeswalker, because they designed this before they decided to despark planeswalkers, didn't they? Right? Like, I don't remember exactly at what point they said internally they decided that, but it takes them about a year and a half to make these changes. So while they may have been able to make some surface changes, underneath the initial story would still show the first characters. So on that level, I'm very curious to see what the actual information is going to turn out to be. But this is an indicator of how bad things have gotten at Wizards of the Coast. This is a story spotlight card. But more than that, the error happens on a showcase edition of a story spotlight card. This is supposed to be the most special variation, and they didn't bother to make sure that it has the finished artwork. It's absolutely wild considering how much money Wizards of the Coast spends on this artwork. They spend over $1,000 per piece of artwork, and they're just cram it out there. I mean, it doesn't speak well to the future of Magic in terms of AI and overall art direction when you have an art director who allows this kind of stuff. I'm in charge of the art direction. Didn't make sure you guys had the finalized version. I guess, in all fairness, that might actually be somewhere else in the process. I don't know who messed up 100%, but the art director clearly is hiring artists that are stealing other people's work. We saw that recently. So overall, my gripes with the art department, at least in some ways, are valid. But ultimately, this speaks to the systemic problems at Wizards of the Coast, and I truly believe this is because they are moving at a breakneck pace. They can't keep up, right? Like, it's literally impossible to keep up with the pace of Magic. Actually, it's gotten to the point where product fatigue is a term that people don't really use anymore because there's no time to stop and say you're fatigued, because there's no cadence anymore. It used to be 3 or 4 releases a year. What I'm gonna say is gonna sound insane to you, right? It's gonna sound crazy. We used to get 3 sets a year. And then Wizards, like many years ago, they made the Cold Snap set, and they went, check it out, we found this secret set behind the filing cabinet, we're going to print it and put it out, isn't that cool? And they put it out, and they added it into the mix. Check it out, we're adding it into standard. We're going to add one more set in it. And it made things so much more complex for people, and so out of hand that they went, okay, let's dial it back. We've decided, after looking at the numbers, that adding in one more set is too much. But now we've reached the point where there is no slowdown. There is no stopping. There are previews for Return to Ravnica going on right now. There are at least 2 or 3 different kinds of promos that are being previewed. I'm going to gather those all together, I think, and we're going to do a big promo marathon looking at all kinds of crazy new stuff that's coming. But ultimately, the fact remains that product fatigue doesn't exist because we live in an endless ocean of product. It's almost like Wizards of the Coast is trying to condition everybody to just being used to there always being some new Magic product. And I suppose, actually, if I'm fair, if we're looking for a tiny silver lining, they have recaptured one aspect at the beginning of Magic that was gone for me. And that was knowing all the cards. When you first started Magic, you'd have no idea what you're going to run into until you cracked it in a booster or were playing it. Part of that has actually been recaptured in terms of, wow, there's so many cards, I literally can't keep track of everything that's going on. So, like, that would be okay if it wasn't that the game is doing terribly, that we have insane power creep. We're living in this like ridiculous cycle. Just look at what happened with the brand new Ixalan set. These dinosaurs are so insanely powerful that most dinosaurs from before don't really matter anymore. So Wizards is in this cycle of reprinting crazy amounts of things, also power creeping hardcore, and trying to push out an endless amount of products all at the same time. So you have a bunch of overworked employees who can't keep up. Now, Wizards of the Coast has just had layoffs. Hasbro is laying off, 1,100 people? Well, like almost 24 people are getting the boot from Wizards of the Coast. So now we have multiple fewer employees with a company that can't keep up on production. And actually, as a side note, I do want to talk about those whole firings from the perspective of one of the individuals who was fired was the woman who was in charge of the Universe Beyond aspect of Magic the Gathering. So basically, if you look at that, you go, okay, Wizards of the Coast is axing someone in charge of Universes Beyond. What does that say? Most likely it says that they're codifying Universe Beyond. It's not a side thing anymore. It's a main part of Magic. We don't need a separate leader of a division or whatever you would call it for that, right? We are now encapsulating it in this, and that means more Universes Beyond. Obviously, we knew that was coming with Marvel, right? Marvel is going to be absolutely bonkers. I can't even imagine. We're going to see some crazy stuff, either an Infinity Gauntlet, the stones, whatever, you name it, individual, like Thor's hammers. There's so many different individual serialized. I'm expecting a bunch of one-offs, right? The one-of-one ring was so banger. Why wouldn't they try and pull that off on multiple tiers? If you can instantly generate a $2 million collectible, can you generate 5 $1 million collectibles, or Wildest Dreams $2 million collectibles? Can you emulate that across all 5? And so you've got a company that's moving at breakneck pace to just churn. They've just churned off two dozen employees as well. And so we're going to see more and more of these problems going forward, where less and less effort is put into the products in terms of, let's give an actual story that makes sense. Let's make sure the continuity is there. I mean, this problem really started, actually, funnily enough, talking about the Universe Beyond stuff, it started back in the Strixhaven days, where we had multiple cards from Strixhaven that were messed up as a result of an obvious tie-in. They were originally aiming for Harry Potter. Some of the card names that they had were names of characters from Harry Potter, right? It's just, oops, we accidentally left it on the card, even though we changed this guy's name to this. So Universes Beyond has been tripping Wizards up from the get-go, and now it's just going to get layered in deeper, to the point where you have the showcase version of a story spotlight card. These should be the most important cards in the set. If you're going to spend any time scrutinizing any cards, it should be the 15 to 20 cards that represent your storyline, and obviously then your planeswalkers, your big story characters. Anything that's going to create cognitive dissonance should be avoided, right? You're going to the effort to pay for this art. Go to the effort of, like, you literally had them rework it as well, because this wasn't the finalized version. Now, in all fairness, it may turn out that it's not going to be something as crazy as Kellen is somebody else in the artwork, but they're not showing anybody at all on the website. That could be a quick put out a little sentence, but I'm just going off of what they've done previously in these circumstances, right? So basically, that wraps up that part of it. Now I want to talk about what's going on with MTGO and the staggering collapse of it. And we haven't talked about Magic the Gathering Online, I'm guessing probably in a couple of years, right? Maybe a little less than that. I can't recall specifically when MTGO was handed off to Daybreak Games, but if you don't know about it, MTGO is like Granddaddy Arena. It is the first Magic the Gathering online client that was ever created, and it gives a pretty good one-to-one experience in terms of emulating real paper Magic. Now, as an aside, I do have to say that MTGO is incredibly clunky. It's always been ugly and unwieldy, and it certainly does have functionality issues. There is a big long list of particular cards that have bugs, and unless they've changed things with the handover, basically the way they handled it was to go, okay, we tried to sort out some of these bugs, but we can't. If you're caught abusing these bugs, you'll get nailed with your account, so you can't use them in tournaments and stuff like that, right? So ultimately, it is in no way like perfect, but it does allow you to have, like, yo, you can go grab booster packs, you can get into drafts and all that stuff. But unlike Arena, where Arena goes, hey, we're trying to, like, under the surface match you up and do all these kind of underlying things that can't happen in physical Magic. Like, in physical Magic, it's basically just your win rate in one event that matches you up, right? Or maybe some other rating depending. But overall, there's not nearly the same thing that's going on with Arena, where there's all kinds of checks and balances being used to place you against the kind of deck that's going to keep you at basically a 50-50 win rate. If you're really good at Magic and you go on to MTGO, you can just keep winning drafts, playing through events, and build up your collection, right? So MTGO offers a closer to real Magic experience in a lot of ways, but at the same time, Arena doesn't cost you anything to get into. MTGO, you do have to pay for, but it has every card, and you can get all of the cards for like a fraction of the price. And I mean a mega fraction. Do you want to play with a Black Lotus? I think the cheapest Black Lotus is like $5, right? Which is kind of crazy to think that a digital Magic card that you can never physically take out of the game is actually worth like a full $5 all by itself. But that's the reality. And speaking of being able to take cards out of the game, MTGO also offers you the ability to literally build entire sets and then redeem them. Now you can only do this with the newest sets. They have to be like standard legal, brand new, and Wizards only prints X number of these redemption sets. And I expect that they've probably decreased them now that they've handed it off to Daybreak Games. But ultimately what happened is Wizards didn't want to just shutter MTGO because it would look bad, they would lose customers, and it was generating revenue. But they just decided, okay, we don't want anything to do with this, but we also don't want it to be obvious that we've just like shut it down and run away from it. So we'd rather it just kind of dwindle away to nothingness. Now that's my belief. Obviously I can't prove internally that's what's going on, but that's my belief. So they hand it off to Daybreak Games. Now Daybreak Games is like, you know, when your grandma, she ain't walking no more. And you're like, we got to take you to the old folks home, grandma, the one you ain't never coming out of. This is your forever home. Well, that's what Wizards did. They handed MTGO off to its forever home, where it's just kind of like, we don't care what happens. And from all accounts, from what I've heard, it's actually been handled half decently overall, right? Like they've done a pretty good job of trying to make tweaks and keeping it going, which I don't know. I don't know how hard that is. You're dealing with like decades old software that is clunky and broken. You're trying to tweak it and get it going, and also find a way for your company to extract your value from it. But also, there's the player side value of it too, right? Like Wizards didn't like MTGO because it used a ticket system where you buy tickets and these tickets are used to enter into events. So what do you want to play? In a $10 event? Well, guess what? The tickets are $1 a piece. So you buy 10 tickets and in you go. And so a very natural economy developed around these tickets. They're worth $1. So this built the economy out around it, and players could, most importantly, trade cards between each other. Like imagine Arena, where you could literally just trade all your stuff between each other. It makes such a huge difference, right? So you have these tickets and they work as the backbone, the dollar of the economy, right? But what happens is that's never changed. It's been a ticket's $1 for like 20 years now, right? But $1 has become worth less and less and less, right? So these tickets are worth less and less and less comparatively overall. So you have this comparison where it starts to break down the market as more and more people just kind of exit the game, because there were some people who were staying in there because it felt like, well, you know, the tickets, there's certain people who functioned as part of the Magic economy, basically like buying and selling tickets, right? And so like you'd have individuals doing that, but also big companies based around it. For example, MTGO traders, right? These guys have been operating for something like a decade and a half. They have bots on there where you can go and buy and you can buy the stuff from them, you can sell your cards to them, and you can take the tickets that are in your physical account, and you can your digital account, right? You can take those tickets that are in your digital account and liquidate them. You could actually sell them to websites like this, to companies like this, and they would pay you out like 95 cents on the dollar, right? Like you're barely even taking any kind of haircut on the value of it at all. So this ecosystem has been steadily eroding. First of all, just due to more people being brought into Arena and fewer people being introduced to MTGO. Wizards of the Coast isn't like advertising for it anymore. So they have this steady trickle out. You have the devaluing of tickets. And then you have also, it's become like a rental environment where you can actually go on MTGO and you can just pay to rent cards. So you don't own them. You don't keep them in your collection. You can't cash them out. You couldn't convert them into physical cards. None of that. But you can play as much Magic as you want for a fraction of the price. So basically, the accelerated market forces plus this sort of rental market has just caused the biggest player that just leaving the game right now, MTGO Traders, is closing down. They put out an announcement saying, we're shutting it down, guys. We're not taking in anything new anymore at all. And apparently near the end there, people were having a hard time selling out their tickets to them, obviously, because as you're winding down your business, you're like, sorry, I don't want what is now toxic, like garbage, basically. Once you try to get out, that's what all those things in the game become. So they're turning around now and they are bleeding out all their bots. And then boom, they're going to be gone. Decade and a half. They've been there for almost the entirety of MTGO's history, right? And they're winding down. And this is a sequence of things we're seeing in different areas of Magic. Remember, we saw Troll and Toad say with physical Magic cards, you know what, bro? It's not even worth it anymore. We're done. You're out of here. Now we're seeing MTGO go, nope. Forget it. We're ditching this too. We're out. This isn't a viable business anymore. So MTGO, it's not rest in peace yet, but it's coming. It is absolutely coming, right? This is a knock-on effect. You're going to have fewer and fewer players in the market, and then once it gets to a point where there's fewer people to deal with, those rental prices go up. And once those rental prices go up, you've got fewer people doing it. And once you got fewer people doing it, those rental people, they got to push it up at first a little bit more to try and make more money, then start dropping it down. So we are in the inevitable end race to the bottom with MTGO, and there is nothing that will pull it out of this tailspin because Wizards of the Coast has to manage it themselves to have it mean anything. So this is a moment in Magic the Gathering's history. I don't know how many years it's going to take before I'm telling you guys that MTGO is finished, but it is going to happen. That wraps up today's Mega Magic News. Thanks for coming by, my friends. Big shout out to all of my patrons. Thanks for supporting my channel. You guys rule. And tonight, I am doing a very special and ridiculous live stream over on my other YouTube channel. You are welcome to come and join. And you know what? As an added little note, thank you to those of you who went and subscribed to my live stream archive channel. We're already up to 805 out of the 1,000 subscribers over there. Feels great. And all the nice comments of people saying, yo, you know what, man, just because I like what you do and you never really asked me for anything, bam, I'm going to subscribe even though I'm not watching over there. So thanks, my friends. See you next time.